It's also related to the time when he worked. He started photography in the 40s, but he really decided to become a professional around 1952. He moved to Paris, and with this photograph of the painter of the Eiffel Tower that you saw, it was his first photograph published in Life magazine and in Marie Claire, so French magazine. Following this publication, he was invited to join Magnum Agency. So that was, of course, an important step for him. And he immediately decided to travel abroad. So first in Europe, he went to Yugoslavia, to England. And in 1955, he went by the road to travel all the way to India and then China. So his first visit in China, he came actually from India and Nepal. So it was a difficult exercise to sum up all this work about China in a 20-minute movie. And it's really it's a really special memory, because in China in the 50s, 60s and 70s, well, until the end of Cultural Revolution, photography was not permitted. So even keeping family photographs at home was reprehensive. Some Chinese photographers could work, but they had to hide their work or bury it. So there is very few photographs at that time. So what is important for us is that it's a testimony of history, and it's also a country that changed so much in a short time. We can see that in the photographs, and to went back on the history. To tell you a bit more, when Marc Riboud, a bit more about the archive, because Marc Riboud was concerned about the future of his archive. He has 4 children, and he didn't want his archive to be separated. How would it be possible to cut the archive in 4? So he wanted to give it to an institution. But there is no one institution for photography in France. It's surprisingly photography. When we say photography was invented in France, we are not the only one, but it's still quite a new form of art. There are still debates about it. So it took him like 15 years to find the right place for his archive. There was a project with the city of Lyon, so his native city, where he lived until he was about 30. It didn't work out for political reasons, and then he was looking in Paris, but he couldn't find an institution that would preserve the archive, but at the same time make it alive. He was really conscious that if his archive would arrive in boxes in a museum, it would probably stay there during 10 years before someone would open the boxes, because there is not enough people working. So that's why he created 20 years ago the Association Les Amis de Marc Riboud. So I work for the association, and the institution who would receive the archive had to make room for this association, so as a sort of partnership to work together. And it was not the first time this had been done, but it's not very common. So we had to find the right institution. And luckily, it's actually the president of Guimet National Asian Arts Museum, Sophie Macariou, who contacted us, because she knew that we were looking for an institution, and she had the desire to welcome the archive. So we worked with her team, mostly on administrative purpose, for the legacy, the donation, and how to work together. So we have a contract between the museum, the association, and Marc Riboud's heirs, which says, which structure can do what. So, for example, for the exhibition which is shown downstairs, it's a project that was carried by our association, and Marc Riboud passed away in 2016, and the archive was finally donated in 2019. At each step, it takes months or years. So 3 years ago, the archive was donated to the museum, and it's a kind of mixed management that works quite well. Actually, we're quite happy about it. It was not evident. So now, because the museum, they have one curator for the whole collection of photography, which starts at 19th century. So this curator could not answer to all the requests we receive, and together with the museum's team, we can work to keep Marc Riboud's work alive and to investigate new subjects. We had lots of projects with China actually when the COVID started, so everything stopped, of course. Maybe it will start in a few years. We don't know. It's also political issues. And then we have new projects, so like the exhibition downstairs. We didn't really expected it, but we knew, of course, the photographs, but not in detail, because they hadn't been shown, most of them, for 50 years. And I know there are other reportages that should be investigated soon. The fact that the archive is now at the museum, it helped us to get students to come and work on the archive. We had, last year, for example, we had a student who came and she studied all the photographs taken in Thailand, which was completely underseen, and she did a great job. So this kind of work help us to understand better, and as time passes, and I think when I saw the movie, Marc Riboud had this intuition that his work had importance, and not only as a photographer, but for history. It's important traces, and our view on them changes, even in when we speak about the choice of photographs. He was, and luckily he was not closed to choice. This object, the contact sheet, so it really belonged to his generation of photographers who worked in the 50s to the 80s, mainly for the press. His main revenues came from the press, and they had these films that were contacted to have the contact sheets, and then the editing was made. So it's the marks you see with the red, mostly red, but sometimes other color pencils. And it was made by him, or it was made by other photographers of Magnum Agency or staff of Magnum Agency. So it's interesting to know that at this time the editing was made for the press, and as he lived a long life, he had time to look at these contacts again. I say it corresponds to this time because now I'm sure for younger photographers who work only digitally, there are other issues of organizing their work. Here we have a very simple numérotation. Enfin, each contact sheet is numbered with the year, the number of reportage during the same year, number of contact sheet, and then you can add the view number, and you are referring to a very precise picture. So it's a very easy way to locate photographs and to exchange about it. So yeah, I'm sure there are other issues now for younger photographers, and for the memories of country. If we talk about China, for example, we have worked with someone who collects family photographs in garbage, family negatives that are thrown away when people die or just move. And he collects them, and that builds a sort of history of China in the 80s, 90s, but for the period of time after, it's much more difficult actually to find these kind of photographs, and because it depends on technology and technology changes, so traces are harder to keep. the one goal we have. So it's of course to have Marc Riboud's work more lively and to show what has not been shown since. It's also to preserve the work. So we work with the museum's team to put all these contact sheets. We worked on them last year with an intern who did a really great job. So we put them in all appropriate boxes, and they were all digitalized. So now when we work for projects even abroad, it's easy to send them and to work on editing with people abroad. It's much easier than before. And next step would be the negatives, because they are not really organized, so I can find myself. But for example, if someone else wants to work on the archive, it's more complicated. So the idea is that we have these upcoming years to organize the archive the best we can and to make it accessible. The idea is not to keep it for ourselves, but to make it more accessible. Also, the museum is working on a new website, so they will have a database online, so we'll also work on that to have more Marc Riboud's photographs available. That is a huge task, but we make plans. Like 1 year, we try to do something. And it enriched the collection of photography in the museum, so there are also new projects about the complete collection of photography. I think it will be quite interesting, and to reconsider some status of photographs. We still have these debates because photography is still quite new, as I said. So some people find it only documentary, some others consider the more artistic part. So it's still an issue. It's surprising for me. I thought the question was settled 20 years ago, but it hasn't. What else could I say? I would like to say a few words about the first movie, because it's older, but I think it's still very actual. It was, you must have seen in the générique that the idea of this series of film was William Klein. So Bill Klein, he was a very famous, important photographer. He passed away very recently, actually. American born, but he lived in Paris most of his life. And one of the producers of the movie was CNP, which is Centre National de la Photographie, National Center of Photography. It makes me evoke another important figure at the time, who is publisher Robert Delpire. Robert Delpire created the National Center of Photography when Jacques Lang was the Ministry of Culture. So it's like, I think it opened in 1982, and it was a great place it was the first cultural public institution who hosted exhibition of photographs in France, and they did hundreds of exhibitions, some of them traveled, and he's also the publisher of Photo Poche, so Photo File in English. It's a collection of little black books, which were the first cheap photo books that they could print. Actually, they chose the size because of the size of printing machines, so the whole printing could be made on one sheet of paper that was then cut and folded. And now the collection has about 100 titles, even more, with some smaller collections. But it was a new idea at the time, and a really important one. It stays an important collection, and some publishers abroad are publishing. So in English it's Thames and Hudson. So these are important figures of the photography of this time. I think they lasted. Now there are new generations, of course, but these are like pillars. What else? Maybe you visited CNP?
Yeah.
Yes? I only saw photographs. I would have loved to see exhibitions there. It's in Palais de Tokyo, so now it's a contemporary art museum in Paris. Maybe you have questions, because it's usually the best shot if we have two views to compare. But there are photographs of China. There's also work we need to do on the color slides, because they are part of the photographic archives, but few of them are published. The only work he did in color very consciously and as a photographer, as an artist, I could say, are the photographs we saw in the second movie of the mountains, these Chinese mountains with the clouds and the mist. So it's the Huangshan Mountains, so Yellow Mountains. First time he went there was in 1983, and he went back several times after. And it's the first time he really did color as a purpose. So we still have some work to do on the color, and I think also for Bangladesh we should find some, because we know some from the publications. So he took colors also, but we need to locate them. We're still doing a work with Magnum Photo to locate the color slides and gather them together. So I'm going in their storages, and I spend days looking in drawers that are organized by country or subject to try to locate Marc Riboud's color slides. Yes.